everyone, welcome to another deep dive with us.
Glad to be here.
So today we're going to be tackling a pretty fascinating topic.
Yeah.
The economic principles found in the Quran.
It's a rich topic for sure.
It really is. And, it's not just about like theology or anything like that. We're going to be looking at the actual economic ideas presented throughout the Quran.
Right. It's amazing how the Quran blends spiritual guidance with practical matters like economics.
Exactly. And it's not your typical economics textbook, right? Which I think makes it even more interesting.
Definitely. It offers a unique perspective.
So get ready, folks, because we're going to be exploring some thought-provoking themes, like the prohibition of interest, the emphasis on fair trade, and even how the Quran addresses things like wealth and poverty.
Those are some big ones.
They are, and they're incredibly relevant even today. Prepare to see economics in a whole new light.
I think people will be surprised by how much these ancient principles resonate with modern issues.
I agree. All right, let's dive in. First up, let's talk about the concept of riba, which is often translated as interest. The Quran seems pretty clear about its stance on this.
Yeah, it's definitely a key principle. The Quran strongly condemns riba, but it's about so much more than just saying don't charge interest. It's about creating a just and ethical economic system that benefits everyone.
So it's not just a rule, it's a whole philosophy.
Exactly. The Quran really digs into the potential harms of interest-based systems.
Like what kinds of harms?
Well, for one, it can lead to exploitation, especially for those who are already vulnerable.
That makes sense. It creates an uneven playing field.
Right. And it can trap people in cycles of debt that are really hard to break free from.
That makes me think about those predatory lending practices we see even today, where people are pushed further and further into debt. It's a real problem.
And the Quran recognized this problem centuries ago. That's why it encourages alternative financial models like profit-sharing partnership.
Oh, that's interesting. So instead of one party benefiting at the expense of the other.
Right. It's about sharing both the risks and the rewards.
More like a collaborative approach.
Exactly. It promotes a sense of shared responsibility and fosters a different kind of economic relationship, one built on trust and mutual benefit.
So it's not just about saying no to interest. It's about proposing a better way of doing things.
Absolutely. A system that prioritizes fairness and cooperation.
It really makes you wonder, what would our financial world look like if interest were completely off the table?
It's a fascinating question to consider. It challenges us to imagine alternative economic models that prioritize the well-being of everyone.
Food for thought, for sure. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about another key principle highlighted in the Quran: fair trade.
This is a big one. The Quran repeatedly emphasizes honesty and fairness in all transactions.
Like a moral foundation for economic activity.
Exactly. And it doesn't just speak in generalities. It lays out specific examples.
Oh, like what?
Well, for example, using accurate scales for measurement, being transparent in your dealings, avoiding any kind of deception, honoring your contracts, keeping your promises. These are all things that build trust and create a healthy economy.
It's like building an economy on a foundation of integrity.
Precisely. The Quran teaches that economic activity should be guided by a moral compass, not just by the pursuit of profit.
So it's about more than just following the rules. It's about upholding the spirit of fairness in everything you do.
Right, think about it. Have you ever been treated unfairly in a business deal?
Oof, yeah, it leaves a bad feeling.
Exactly. The Quran's principles are designed to protect everyone involved and ensure that economic interactions are based on mutual respect and ethical conduct.
I like that. Okay, now let's talk about something that feels incredibly relevant today: the Quran's view on waste.
Oh, this is a big one, especially in our modern consumerist culture.
It's so easy to fall into the trap of overconsumption.
And the Quran is very clear in its condemnation of extravagance and unnecessary consumption. It draws a distinction between spending on what you truly need and indulging in wasteful excesses.
So it's not about deprivation. It's about being mindful and responsible with your resources.
Exactly. And this has implications not just for individuals, but for society as a whole.
Yeah. It makes me think about the environmental challenges we face because of overconsumption.
Absolutely. The Quran reminds us that our resources are finite and that our choices have consequences, that our consumption habits impact not just ourselves, but the world around us.
It's a call for responsible stewardship.
Exactly. It encourages us to consider the long-term impacts of our actions.
This raises an important question for everyone listening. What are some ways you could be more mindful of your own consumption habits? It's a challenge to break free from the consumerist mindset, but I think the Quran offers a valuable perspective.
I agree. It's about shifting our focus from more is better to enough is enough.
Okay, so we've talked about interest, fair trade, and waste. What's next?
Let's talk about property rights, another fundamental principle highlighted in the Quran.
Right. The Quran seems to place a strong emphasis on protecting individual property rights.
It does, and for good reason. Property rights are crucial for a stable and prosperous society.
In what way?
Well, when individuals feel secure in their ownership, they're more likely to invest, innovate, and contribute to economic growth.
So it creates a sense of security and encourages people to build for the future.
Exactly. It fosters a sense of responsibility and allows individuals to reap the rewards of their hard work.
It seems like the Quran really emphasizes personal responsibility in a lot of ways, not just in our financial dealings, but also in how we manage and utilize what we have.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that we are stewards of our resources and that we are accountable for our choices.
And finally, let's talk about wealth inequality. This is a huge issue in our world today, and it seems like the Quran has a lot to say about it.
It definitely does. The Quran is deeply concerned for the poor and vulnerable, and it outlines several mechanisms to address wealth disparities. One of the most important is zakat.
That's where it gets really interesting. Tell me more about zakat.
Well, it's often described as an obligatory form of charity for Muslims, but it's so much more than that. It's really a system designed to ensure that wealth circulates within society and doesn't just accumulate in the hands of a few.
So it's a form of wealth redistribution.
Exactly. It's a spiritual obligation that has very real economic effects.
How does it work in practice?
Essentially, a certain percentage of a Muslim's wealth is redistributed to those in need within the community.
Wow, so it's like a built-in system for social safety and poverty alleviation.
Precisely. It's a remarkable example of how the Quran integrates spiritual principles with practical solutions for social and economic well-being.
And it goes beyond individual acts of charity. It's like it's woven into the fabric of the economic system itself.
You got it. It's not just about personal piety. It's about creating a more just and equitable society for everyone.
This is fascinating stuff. We've covered so much ground in this deep dive into the Quran's economic principles.
And we're just getting started. There's so much more to explore.
I know, right? Stay tuned, folks, because we'll be right back to continue this deep dive.
Welcome back, everyone. We're continuing our deep dive into the economic principles within the Quran.
It's been really eye-opening so far.
It has.
So in the last part, we talked about the Quran's prohibition of interest.
Right, one of the foundational principles.
But I'm curious about how that actually plays out in the real world. I mean, how do you completely avoid interest in today's financial system?
It's a good question, and it's definitely something that people grapple with. But remember, the Quran offers alternatives to traditional lending with interest.
Oh, right, like those profit-sharing partnerships we talked about.
Exactly. So instead of lending money with a fixed interest rate, individuals or institutions can pool their resources for a particular venture.
And then they share the profits or losses proportionally.
Right. It's a shared risk and reward model.
Which seems a lot fairer than one party profiting at the expense of the other.
Definitely. And it encourages a different kind of relationship between the parties involved. More collaboration and mutual benefit.
So it's not just about avoiding a specific transaction. It's about fostering a different economic mindset.
Exactly. One based on trust and shared responsibility.
Are there any real-world examples of this? Like, are there financial institutions that operate on these principles?
Absolutely. There are entire Islamic banking systems that are based on these principles. They offer a wide range of financial products and services that are designed to avoid interest-based transactions altogether.
Wow. So it's not just the theoretical concept, it's actually being put into practice.
Exactly. And these systems are gaining more and more recognition globally as people seek out more ethical and equitable financial options.
That's really encouraging to hear. Okay, so we've talked about interest. Let's move on to another fascinating aspect of the Quran's economic vision: the condemnation of hoarding wealth.
This is a really crucial point, especially when we consider the growing problem of wealth inequality in the world today.
Right. It seems like the Quran is really concerned with how wealth is distributed and utilized within society.
It is. The Quran criticizes those who hoard their wealth and neglect their social responsibility.
So it's not just about how much wealth you accumulate, but how you use it.
Exactly. The Quran emphasizes that wealth should be a means to benefit society, not just to enrich oneself.
It's like a reminder that wealth comes with responsibilities.
Exactly. And this is where the concept of zakat comes in again.
Right. Zakat is about more than just giving charity. It's a system that ensures wealth is circulating and reaching those in need.
Exactly. It's a vital mechanism for addressing wealth disparities and promoting social justice.
So it's not about condemning wealth itself. It's about ensuring that it's used in a way that benefits the whole community.
Right. The Quran recognizes that wealth can be a tool for doing good. It's the hoarding and the neglect of others that it condemns.
It makes me think about the importance of generosity and giving back to society.
Absolutely. The Quran highly encourages charitable acts and views them as a form of investment in the hereafter.
It's like a beautiful integration of spiritual and social motivations.
Exactly. It highlights the idea that true wealth encompasses more than just material possessions. It's also about spiritual fulfillment and contributing to the well-being of others.
This is really resonating with me. It's like the Quran offers a more holistic understanding of wealth and economics.
It definitely does. It's not just about maximizing profits. It's about ethical conduct, social responsibility, and the impact we have on the world around us.
This deep dive is really challenging my assumptions about economics.
That's what we're hoping for, to spark new ways of thinking.
Before we wrap up this part, I want to give our listeners a moment to reflect on what we've discussed.
That's an idea.
We've been talking about some pretty profound concepts, and I think it's important to take a step back and really let it all sink in.
Agreed. These are ideas that can really challenge our perspectives and encourage us to look at economics in a new light.
So to everyone listening, take a moment and think about what stands out to you, what resonates with you, what challenges your current understanding of economics, and how might these insights from the Quran inspire you to think differently about your own financial choices and responsibilities. We'll be back soon for the final part of our deep dive. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the economic principles of the Quran.
I can't believe how quickly it's flown by.
I know, right? It feels like we've just scratched the surface.
We definitely have. There's always more to learn.
So for this last part, I want to talk about a theme that seems to be at the heart of everything we've discussed. Balance.
Balance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Quran doesn't seem to advocate for like a totally ascetic life, rejecting all worldly possessions. But it also doesn't endorse unchecked materialism.
But that's a great point. It's all about finding that middle path.
Exactly, like enjoying the blessings of this world, but not letting them consume you.
Right. It's about recognizing that material wealth is not the ultimate goal, that there's a higher purpose to life.
So how do we find that balance? What does the Quran say about it?
Well, the Quran reminds us that this life is a test, and that wealth can easily become a distraction.
A distraction from what?
From our spiritual growth, from our connection with God, from fulfilling our true purpose.
So it's not about rejecting wealth altogether.
No, not at all. It's about using it wisely, being grateful for what we have, and remembering what truly matters.
It's about keeping things in perspective.
Exactly. The Quran encourages us to strive for success in this world, but not at the expense of our spiritual well-being.
So how does that play out in our daily lives? Like, what does that balance look like in practice?
It's about making conscious choices in all aspects of our economic lives. How we earn our money, how we spend it, how we invest it.
Right. It's about aligning our economic activities with our values.
Exactly. The Quran provides guidelines on what's considered permissible or ethical in terms of earning and spending.
You mean the concepts of halal and haram?
Yes. Those concepts extend to our economic activities as well.
So halal is what's permissible, and haram is what's forbidden.
Right. And these guidelines help us navigate the complexities of the modern world while staying true to our Islamic principles.
So it's about more than just making money. It's about making money in a way that's ethical and doesn't compromise our values.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that our economic choices have both spiritual and worldly consequences.
This is really fascinating stuff. It's like the Quran offers a whole different framework for understanding economics, one that takes into account not just material wealth, but also our ethical responsibilities and our relationship with God.
Exactly. It's a holistic approach that integrates spiritual, ethical, and economic principles.
And it feels incredibly relevant to the challenges we face in the world today, like economic inequality, climate change, and ethical concerns in business.
You're right. The Quran's teachings offer timeless wisdom that can guide us towards a more just and balanced world.
It's like a blueprint for a better future, one that takes into account the needs of both present and future generations.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive.
It really has.
We've covered so much ground, but I feel like there's still so much more to explore.
There always is. The Quran is a source of endless wisdom.
So to everyone listening, we encourage you to keep learning and reflecting on these principles and to think about how you can apply them in your own lives.
and to see how these ancient teachings can inspire us to create a more just and balanced world for everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.